I still remember the exact moment when everything I thought I knew about naval warfare shattered like glass against steel. It was March 1942, and I was standing on the bridge of a destroyer in the North Atlantic, watching a merchant convoy burn on the horizon. The screams carried across the water, mixing with the howl of the wind and the distant rumble of explosions. I was Lieutenant Commander James Mitchell, United States Navy, and I had just witnessed the brutal efficiency of Germany's submarine wolf packs, tearing apart our supply lines like sharks in a feeding frenzy. The cold Atlantic spray hit my face as I gripped the railing, my knuckles white with frustration. We had the answer to this slaughter. We had developed it, tested it, proven it could work. But politics, bureaucracy, and short-sighted admirals had banned the one strategy that could have saved thousands of lives and prevented millions of tons of vital supplies from ending up at the bottom of the ocean. They called it too aggressive, too risky, too unconventional. My journey to that moment began 2 years earlier, in the spring of 1940, when I was a young lieutenant assigned to the Navy's Anti-Submarine Warfare Development Unit in Norfolk, Virginia. The facility was a collection of weathered buildings near the waterfront, where the smell of salt water, mixed with diesel fuel, and the constant sound of machinery created a symphony of military industry. Commander Robert Harrison ran our unit, a grizzled veteran with 30 years of experience and a mind that operated like a chess grandmaster. He had silver hair, sharp blue eyes that missed nothing, and a habit of pacing when he was thinking through a problem. The first day I reported to his office, he was standing in front of a large map of the Atlantic Ocean, marked with dozens of red pins representing reported U-boat attacks. "Mitchell, come look at this," he said without turning around. "Tell me what you see." I studied the map carefully, noting the patterns of attacks, the shipping lanes, the areas of highest concentration. "The U-boats are operating in coordinated groups, sir. They're intercepting our convoys far from shore, overwhelming the escorts with numbers." "Exactly right." Harrison turned to face me. "The British are calling them wolf packs. One submarine finds a convoy, calls in others, and they attack in waves. Our current defensive tactics are completely inadequate. We're losing ships faster than we can build them." He walked to his desk and pulled out a thick folder marked "Classified." Inside were reports, diagrams, and photographs of a radical new approach to submarine warfare. "We're developing something called hunter-killer groups," he explained. "Instead of waiting for U-boats to attack our convoys, we take the fight to them. Small, fast groups built around escort carriers with specialized anti-submarine vessels. We hunt them down in their patrol areas, force them to stay submerged, disrupt their operations." The concept was brilliant in its simplicity. Traditional convoy escorts were defensive, reactive. Hunter-killer groups would be offensive weapons, specifically designed to seek out and sink U-boats before they could threaten convoys. The escort carriers would provide air cover and reconnaissance, while destroyers and destroyer escorts would run down any submarine contacts. Over the next 18 months, I threw myself into the project with an intensity that bordered on obsession. I worked 16-hour days, analyzing intelligence reports, studying U-boat tactics, running simulations and exercises. Commander Harrison became my mentor, teaching me not just about naval warfare, but about the politics and personalities that shaped military decision-making. We ran trials off the Virginia coast in the summer of 1940, using our own submarines as targets. The results were stunning. Our hunter-killer groups detected and sank practice targets at 5 times the rate of traditional convoy escorts. We could cover vast areas of ocean, responding quickly to intelligence about U-boat positions. "This is it, Mitchell," Harrison said after one particularly successful exercise. "This is how we win the Battle of the Atlantic, not by playing defense, but by taking the fight to them." But when we presented our findings to the senior admirals at the Navy Department in Washington, we encountered resistance that ranged from skeptical to hostile. I remember sitting in an oak-paneled conference room, surrounded by men with enough gold braid to outfit a small battleship. Admiral Theodore Cunningham led the opposition. He was old guard Navy, a battleship man who had made his reputation in surface warfare during the First World War. "Gentlemen," he said, not bothering to hide his disdain, "what Commander Harrison and Lieutenant Mitchell are proposing is a fundamental waste of resources. Escort carriers are needed to protect convoys. The idea of sending these valuable assets off on wild goose chases across the Atlantic is strategically unsound." Harrison stood his ground. "Admiral, with respect, the current approach is failing. We're losing ships at an unsustainable rate. The hunter-killer groups have proven their effectiveness in trials." "Your trials were conducted under controlled conditions," another admiral interjected. "The real ocean is different. And what happens when your hunter-killer groups are out hunting submarines while a convoy gets massacred?" The debate went on for hours, but the conclusion was predetermined. They issued a directive that essentially banned the deployment of hunter-killer groups, mandating that all available escorts remain with convoys in a defensive posture. I walked out of that meeting feeling like I had swallowed broken glass. We had the answer, and bureaucratic inertia had killed it before it could even be tried in actual combat. "Don't let it destroy you, son," Harrison said as we stood outside the Navy building. "The Navy is like turning an aircraft carrier. It takes time to change course. We'll keep working. Eventually, they'll have no choice but to listen." But time was running out. In December 1941, everything changed when Japanese aircraft attacked Pearl Harbor. America was suddenly fighting a two-ocean war, and the U-boat threat in the Atlantic became even more critical. Admiral Karl Dönitz unleashed Operation Drumbeat against American shipping. The slaughter was apocalyptic. U-boats operated with near impunity along the East Coast, sinking tankers and freighters within sight of American beaches. The waters off North Carolina became known as Torpedoed Junction. At night, civilians could see ships burning on the horizon. We were losing the war at sea, and the hunter-killer groups that could have made a difference sat unused in port. I was promoted to lieutenant commander and given command of the destroyer USS Farragut in January 1942. She was a Mahan-class destroyer, 341 feet of steel and determination, with a crew of 250 men who looked to me for leadership. My executive officer was Lieutenant Daniel Cooper, a Massachusetts native with a quick mind and steady nerves. We became close friends, spending long watches on the bridge discussing tactics and what we would do after the war. "You really think these hunter-killer groups would make that much difference?" he asked me one night as we steamed north as part of a convoy escort. "I know they would," I said, scanning the horizon with binoculars. "We're playing defense, Dan. We're reacting instead of controlling where the battle happens." 3 days later, the U-boats found us. It was just before dawn, that dangerous time when visibility was poor, but submarines could still operate on the surface. The first torpedo hit a tanker in the center of the convoy, and the explosion lit up the sky. Burning oil spread across the water, turning the ocean into a lake of fire. "General quarters! All hands to battle stations!" I shouted, and the Farragut came alive with the sound of running feet and slamming hatches. We raced toward the source of the attack, our sonar pinging desperately, but the U-boats were already gone, diving deep or racing away faster than we could pursue them. We rescued survivors from the burning ships, pulling men out of oil-slicked water while their skins sloughed off from the burns. I'll never forget their screams, their eyes wide with shock and pain. We saved 18 men that night, but 43 died in the flames or drowned in the freezing Atlantic. As the sun rose on that scene of devastation, I stood on the bridge covered in soot and other men's blood, and something inside me hardened into steel. Every merchant sailor who died represented a failure by the men in Washington who refused to try something new. Commander Harrison contacted me a week later. "Mitchell, there's been a development. The president himself has started asking questions about the convoy losses. He's demanding solutions. We might finally get our chance." Through the spring of 1942, I continued escorting convoys while men like Harrison fought battles in conference rooms. The losses mounted. Every convoy run was a nightmare of tension, waiting for the explosion that meant another ship hit, another crew dying. In April, we escorted a particularly valuable convoy carrying tanks and aircraft desperately needed in Britain. The weather was terrible, with 40-foot seas and winds that screamed across the water. The U-boats hit us on the third night, and this time they came in force. 7 submarines attacked simultaneously, their torpedoes crossing the convoy from multiple directions. Ships were blowing up, men were screaming on the radio, escorts were racing in every direction. I conned the Farragut through that hell like a man possessed, dropping depth charges, firing our guns at surfaced submarines. Lieutenant Cooper worked beside me, his voice steady as he relayed reports. Our sonar operator stayed glued to his equipment for 18 straight hours. We sank 1 U-boat that night, confirmed by wreckage and oil that surfaced, but we lost 11 merchant ships. I wrote letters to the families of the men we couldn't save, knowing that my words were inadequate. Then in May 1942, everything changed. Adolf Hitler made a decision that would alter the course of the Battle of the Atlantic. German intelligence had discovered that the British were planning to invade Norway. The report was false, a deception operation, but Hitler believed it. In a panic, he ordered Admiral Dönitz to withdraw U-boats from the Atlantic convoy routes and redeploy them to defend Norway. The pressure on the Atlantic convoys suddenly eased, and the admirals in Washington finally agreed to trial the hunter-killer groups. Commander Harrison called me personally. "Mitchell, pack your bags, you're being reassigned. I'm putting together the first operational hunter-killer group, and I want you as captain of one of the destroyer escorts." I arrived at Naval Station Norfolk in June to find organized chaos. The Navy was assembling multiple hunter-killer groups as fast as ships could be converted and crews trained. The centerpiece of each group was an escort carrier, capable of operating about 30 aircraft. Surrounding each carrier would be 4 to 6 destroyer escorts. Harrison had been promoted to captain and given command of our group, centered on the escort carrier USS Card. I took command of the destroyer escort USS Brennan, a brand new ship that still smelled of fresh paint. She was 306 feet long, displaced 1,400 tons, and could make 24 knots. More importantly, she was packed with the latest sonar equipment and carried a heavy load of depth charges. My executive officer was Lieutenant Robert Chang, a Chinese-American from San Francisco, whose tactical brilliance had finally earned him this assignment. We bonded over our shared frustration with Navy bureaucracy and our determination to prove the hunter-killer concept worked. I gathered the crew on deck, looking at the sea of young faces staring back at me. They deserved honesty. "Men, I'm not going to lie to you," I began. "What we're about to do has never been tried before in actual combat. We're not going to wait for the U-boats to come to us. We're going to hunt them down and sink them. It's going to be dangerous. But it's also going to save lives and help win this war." They didn't cheer. They were real men who understood the stakes, but I saw determination in their eyes. Captain Harrison assembled our hunter-killer group in late June for final training exercises off Bermuda. The USS Card carried 28 aircraft, including Grumman TBF Avengers, equipped with depth charges and rockets. We spent 2 weeks practicing coordination between the aircraft and surface ships, refining our tactics. Harrison addressed all the officers before our first operational patrol. "Gentlemen, we have intelligence that a U-boat resupply group is operating in the mid-Atlantic. These are Type 14 submarines that refuel and resupply the combat boats. If we can sink even one of them, we'll force multiple combat boats to return to base early." It was exactly the kind of offensive thinking that had been banned just months earlier. We departed Norfolk on July 4th, 1942, Independence Day. As we steamed into the Atlantic, I felt a mixture of excitement and dread. This was what I had trained for, what I had fought for, but I also knew that men were going to die in the coming weeks. The North Atlantic in summer could be treacherous. We encountered a storm system on our second day out, with seas running 30 feet. The Brennan pitched and rolled sickeningly, but we maintained formation, plowing through the storm. Lieutenant Chang proved invaluable during those early days. He had an instinct for reading the ocean and the weather. He also had a way with the crew, knowing when to push them and when to ease off. On July 8th, the storm cleared, and we arrived in our operational area. Captain Harrison launched the Card's aircraft in a systematic search pattern. The destroyer escorts spread out in a loose formation, maximizing our sonar coverage. The waiting was the hardest part. We steamed back and forth across our search area day after day, with nothing but empty ocean. The crew's initial excitement gave way to boredom and fatigue. On July 12th, everything changed. An Avenger pilot named Lieutenant Tim Morrison spotted something on the surface about 40 miles from our position. "Surface contact, bearing 270, range 40 miles, appears to be a large submarine. All ships come to course 270, make turns for 24 knots, Captain Harrison ordered. The Brennan surged forward. I stood on the bridge, adrenaline coursing through my veins. This was it, our first real contact. As we closed to within 10 miles, the U-boat spotted Morrison's aircraft and crash dived. Morrison marked the position with a smoke float, and our ships converged like wolves closing in on prey. "Sonar contact!" our sonar operator shouted. "Bearing 275, range 2,000 yards, moving left to right, depth approximately 200 feet. I conned the Brennan into an attack approach, calculating the submarine's course and speed. "Commence attack," I ordered. "Fire Hedgehog on my mark. 3, 2, 1 mark." The Hedgehog launcher sent 24 projectiles arcing through the air. Each one was designed to sink and explode on contact with the submarine's hull. We waited, with agonizing tension. Nothing. The U-boat had evaded our attack. "Maintain sonar contact," I ordered. He's trying to get deep and run silent. We'll make another approach." For the next 2 hours, we played a deadly game of cat and mouse. Every time we thought we had him pinned, he would change course or depth. The Cards aircraft dropped sonobuoys to help track him. The other destroyer escorts joined the hunt. Finally, the USS Thomas made a perfect depth charge run that bracketed the U-boat with explosions. We all heard the results. The terrible sound of metal tearing, of compartments flooding, of a submarine dying. Wreckage and oil surfaced, confirming the kill. We had sunk our first U-boat. The crew erupted in cheers, but I felt no joy. Somewhere down there, 50 German sailors had just died. They were the enemy, but they were still men. Over the next 3 weeks, our hunter-killer group stalked the mid-Atlantic. We sank 2 more U-boats and damaged several others. More importantly, we disrupted the entire German resupply operation, creating gaps in their patrol lines that allowed convoys to pass through unmolested. Word of our success spread through the Navy like wildfire. Other hunter-killer groups were reporting similar results. The admirals who had opposed the concept suddenly became its biggest supporters. In August, we returned to Norfolk. Captain Harrison called all the officers to a meeting. He looked tired but satisfied. "Gentlemen, I've received word from Admiral King himself," he said. "The hunter-killer groups are being expanded. By the end of 1943, we'll have over a dozen groups operating in the Atlantic. They're calling it the turning point in the Battle of the Atlantic." He paused, looking directly at me. "Mitchell, you're being promoted to commander and given your own hunter-killer group. They're assigning you the escort carrier USS Bogue and 5 destroyer escorts." I should have been elated, but all I felt was weary satisfaction. We had proven what needed to be proven, but I couldn't forget the months we had wasted, the ships that had been sunk, the men who had died while admirals debated. That evening, I walked along the Norfolk waterfront, watching the sun set. I thought about all the young men at the bottom of the Atlantic who had died because we were too slow to adapt. Lieutenant Chang found me there, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might want some company, sir." "Thanks, Robert," I said, using his first name for the first time. "We could have been doing this 2 years ago," he said after a long silence. "How many lives would we have saved?" "I know," I replied, "but we can't change the past. All we can do is make sure we learn from it." The war continued, and the hunter-killer groups became one of the most effective weapons in the Allied arsenal. By the end of 1943, U-boat losses had reached unsustainable levels, and the German submarine force was effectively defeated. We had won the Battle of the Atlantic. I went on to command my hunter-killer group for another 18 months, sinking 6 more U-boats. I saw friends die and made new ones. I learned things about leadership, about courage, about the price of victory that no classroom could ever teach. When the war in Europe ended in May 1945, I was back in Norfolk. I stood on the same waterfront where I had talked with Robert Chang, and I thought about everything that had happened since 1940, when Commander Harrison first showed me the concept for hunter-killer groups. We had been right. The strategy had worked exactly as we predicted, but it had taken a war, thousands of deaths, and Hitler's strategic incompetence to overcome the institutional resistance to change. That was the real lesson. Being right isn't enough. You also have to fight for your ideas, to persist in the face of opposition. I stayed in the Navy after the war, eventually retiring as a Rear Admiral. I spent my later career advocating for innovation, for listening to young officers with new ideas, for not letting tradition prevent us from adapting to new challenges. Looking back now, decades later, I can see how those years shaped everything that came after. The hunter-killer groups weren't just a tactical innovation. They were proof that challenging conventional wisdom and refusing to accept the status quo can change the world. The young men who died in those cold Atlantic waters deserved better. They deserved leaders who were willing to adapt and innovate. I carry their memory with me always, a reminder of the cost of stubbornness. Their sacrifice was not in vain. The hunter-killer groups helped win the war and saved countless lives. But I will always wonder how many more we could have saved if we had started sooner. That is the legacy of 1942, of the strategy they banned until Hitler's mistake gave us a second chance. It is a lesson written in salt water and blood, in burning ships and drowned sailors. It is a lesson I hope we never forget, because that is human nature. To resist change, to cling to what is familiar, to reject new ideas until crisis forces our hand. The hunter-killer groups proved we could be better than that. The question is whether we will choose to be, the next time innovation challenges tradition. That is my story, and my challenge to anyone who reads it. Do not let good ideas die, because they are new. Do not let men perish because you are afraid of change. The cost of such thinking is written in the cold depths of the Atlantic Ocean, in the names on too many memorials. We can do better. We must do better. The dead demand it, and the future depends on it.